Welcome back. This is Sandy with Sandy's Organized Chaos. Now, I see these all over the place. Themed boxes for the holidays. I've even purchased some myself from some other amazing Tumbler artist. But either you make them as a box or these are gifts for friends and family. Either way, these are so fun to make. And I wanted to show you guys kind of a fun fall theme one today. So let's wake up, prep those tumblers, and slay all day. Let's do this. So today we're starting off with our 30-ounce regular curved tumbler here, but you can obviously use any type and size tumbler you have on hand to make this. I went ahead and did an ombre, and I just used vintage blush on the bottom, and I also used this Meadow green. Now the reason why I chose those was because I'm using a very deep green for the top, and I'm using kind of a rosy opal for the bottom. And if you also notice, I made sure that the green went down a little bit further than usual because I only wanted a little bit of that rosy opal to kind of come up onto the bottom. But again, that is completely up to you on how you would like to do this. Now the glitters I'm using are emerald. I'm also going to be using Hello Fall, which is a maple leaf shaped glitter. And I'm also going to be using rose opal. And those are from my glitter shop, socglitters.com. Now you may notice that my chunky glitters are in jars, which is going to be an option coming very soon to my shop. It's not available right now. They do come in bags, but this is going to be an option available very soon. Now, to be able to have enough epoxy to be able to coat my tumbler, my car coasters, and my keychain bangle, I did 2 pumps each of A and B, which is 1 ounce each, so that's 4 ounces of epoxy altogether. Was more than enough to be able to do this entire set. But there was also some left over, so that way if you were doing up more, there would be plenty more to be able to kind of do up more if needed. So I just put a little dab of epoxy right onto my tumbler. I'm going to smooth that out really good so that way I know the entire thing is coated, so that way our glitter has something to stick to. And now we're going to go ahead and start applying our glitter. Now obviously this is a two-tone ombre, so I'm going to be starting off with my bottom color first. This is kind of a smaller chunky glitter, and I like to kind of start with my chunkies first so that way I can form those fine glitters around all the chunky. But I'm just making sure that I hit up the bottom really well. I'm letting my glitter kind of cascade down the sides just a little bit. I don't want to go too far down just yet because we're going to come through and add those maple leaves next. Now I just wanted kind of a small band of these maple leaves right around the center. So what I like to do is just take very few in my fingers because I don't want to accidentally make giant bunches of them, which can happen sometimes. I just wanted a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle that right around the center, right where I would like it to be. Now, after I get these maple leaves down, I'm going to come back through and I'm going to kind of push some of those out of the way, pulling out that I didn't want up into the green too much, and make sure that they're separated. But I know that sometimes when people go to use these shaped type glitters, it's kind of hard because either you don't know what to do with them or you might not know how to apply them with your other glitters. So we have a tendency to do up the cup and then maybe add it after the fact, but it's okay to add it in there. It's very simple. Just making sure that you put it down before you put down your fine glitters so that way it can all kind of just form together around those chunkier glitters. Now that I took those shapes and I just kind of spaced them out the way that I would like, we're going to go ahead and move in with our dark green at the top. Again, I'm going to hit up that rim really well, and I'm just going to let those fine glitters cascade down my tumbler until it meets up right where that rose opal is. And as you can see, those maple leaves stayed right outside of the chunky glitter, and those fines just formed right around it. Now I'm going to come back through with my colors one more time just to make sure that all of my areas are incorporated. I even bring that rose opal up into the green a little bit, continuing on with that ombre look. And once I am done with this, I'm going to set that off to the side and I'm going to let that cure overnight. Now we're ready to start working on those accessories that go with this tumbler. Now this is a little bit messy, especially with the bangle keychain, but I like to use just a box so that way I can kind of carry it around and move it out of my space once I'm done, and I don't have to accidentally spill anything. It happens. So I just use a box to put all my little molds on, and I move it off into a nice flat area after I am done. So my silicone molds have some little glitters in it that I didn't want in there. So I'm just going to take some masking tape. I'm going to clean them up really good, and then we'll be ready to start adding our epoxy. Now I'm going to take this epoxy mixture that I made earlier for the tumbler. I'm going to go ahead and divvy it up, where I'm going to put a little bit into another cup so that way I can have my two colors that I would like to do. Into one cup, I'm going to do up the green. I did a little bit more green than I did the rose opal just because there's more green in my cup, so that's why I did it that way. And as I am stirring it up, I just make sure that I like the consistency of the glitter and the epoxy, because if you don't add enough glitter, the epoxy tends to kind of not separate, but there won't be enough glitter to kind of hold its own in there, and it'll kind of sink to the bottom, and then you'll have like a clear backing, and we don't want that. So you just want to make sure that you add enough glitter to make sure that it stays the color that you would like. And because this epoxy has been sitting for a little bit, it's also a lot better for making these molds and everything, because it will stay kind of in place for you as you go. So as you can see here, I want it to match the kind of form of the ombre look that I was going for with my tumbler, so it's very easy. You just pour in your green first, and then I'm going to come through with my maple leaves, and I'm going to sprinkle those in right into the middle before I add my rose opal glitter. So when I do this, I'm just thinking of how it will look once it's out of the mold. There will be some leaves just on the front in the rose opal, and there will be some leaves on the back where it's just in the green. And that's the look that I was going for. So that's why I did it this way. Now I just kind of took my little silicone brush and again, just separated everything, made sure it looked okay. Now we're ready to pour in the rest of our rose opal right into the bottom. Now I didn't add a lot of the green to the top because I didn't know how much more of the rose opal I was going to add. So now is the time I'm going to go ahead and finish filling it up to the rim of my coaster mold. I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit more green. Then I'm going to come through and apply just a little bit more rose opal. And our car coasters are ready to sit off to the side and cure overnight along with our tumbler. Now we're ready to move on to our bangle keychains. So I'm just going to scoot those to the top of my box there, and we're going to get started on this. Again, I wanted it a separated look where green at the top, rose, opal on the bottom. So I'm actually going to apply my leaves openly inside of it, and it actually gave it a very faint look of the leaves in there where it kind of mixed in with the other two glitters. So if you wanted your leaves to pop out just a little bit more, I would recommend mixing it with a little bit of clear epoxy, so that way it really kind of stands out on its own. Now doing bangle keychains is a little bit messy. Again, that's why I have my box, so that way I can kind of catch anything that might spill over. Typically, I don't spill anything out, but of course, because I was videotaping this, I kind of made a little bit of a mess, which you guys will see here in a minute, but usually I'm pretty good at making sure that these pour right into it because I've done so many of these. But like I said, because I'm videoing, I have to make a mess, I guess. Now again, because our epoxy is even warmer now, it's even better to kind of pour into your molds. It'll be nice and it won't pour out as quick. It'll be a nice smooth flow. And typically what I will do is I'll get a little ribbon going and I will just place it right on top. See how it just slides right down in there? That's typically how I do it. But again, like I said, videoing, but I just make a nice fluid movement of a band of the epoxy and it sinks right down into that mold. And I just keep going on each side until I kind of get it full. You don't want it filled to the very top. You don't want that. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to do one more band of the green right around the outside. I'm going to start shaking it. I'm going to take my popsicle stick and scrape off anything that might be on the outside and just kind of wipe it off on my box on the other side there. And I'm just going to keep an eye on it and see if any bubbles kind of rise to the top and if I need to keep filling it with any more epoxy. So as you go, you'll see there might be a spot that dipped down because a bubble popped. So you just come back through with your epoxy, fill it in, keep pinching it and scraping everything off the top. But the pinching motion I've learned really helps out. It helps those bubbles that are on the very bottom after a putting your epoxy into the bangle mold. It helps them escape to the top. And when you see that, you just kind of pop it and add a little bit more epoxy until it's nice and filled in. When I first started doing bangle molds, I wasn't very good at it, obviously, because it's a learning process. I would open them up after they were cured and there'd be bubbles and everything in there. And you know, we don't want that. So I've learned to just kind of slow it down, make sure that I keep checking it, making sure that there's no bubbles in there, keep pinching it all the way around to make sure everything kind of settles and they come out very smooth after that. And as you can see here, it is not filled to the top. That's another thing I think we all have a tendency to do is overfill these. You just want it below that line there. So I wanted to make sure that I zoomed in on that so that way you guys could see that. We can definitely fill in, but it's a lot harder to kind of get rid of that extra stuff that might be along the back. So I'm gonna go ahead, and now that my coaster molds have been sitting for a little bit, you can see all the little bubbles that have rose to the back. I'm gonna take my rubbing alcohol, give it a couple good spritz, make sure that I do the same thing with my bangle keychain as well. Now I'm gonna take my box and I'm gonna go place it and let it cure overnight along with my tumbler. We are back the next morning. Our tumbler is ready for its coat of epoxy over the raw glitter. But before we do that, you guys know, especially with doing ombres and stuff, I like to use my semi-gloss spray to completely spray this down to make sure there's going to be no glitters shifting around and ruining our ombre. So I went outside, I gave it a couple coatings of that, and now we're going to go ahead and apply a nice coat of epoxy right over the raw glitter. I'm going to go ahead and let that cure again, and then we'll be ready to finish these up. All right, let's unmold all of the stuff that we did. So let's start off with our car coasters first. We're going to go ahead and unmold that, and there's a little bit of flashing on the backside, but that's okay because we're going to come through and give these a little bit of a domed look to finish them off. So if you wanted to apply any type of name, monogram, quote, or anything like that, this is the time you'd want to do that before you apply your epoxy over top of these. So I'm going to go ahead, we're going to get these trimmed up. I'll show you guys that here in a second, but I want to go ahead and open up my keychain bangle as well. And like I talked about earlier, the leaves are very faint in there. So like I said, if you did want your leaves to be more pronounced, I would definitely add just a little bit of that clear epoxy to it. But I like the way this looked. I thought it looked really cool. It really looks like the leaves are just mixed in, and I really like how this turned out a lot. So now we're gonna give these a nice trimming and finish them up. I'm just going to use a sharp knife. I just use my box cutter. You just want to be very careful, and you want to trim off any of that sharp flashing that might be on the back. You could even give it a little sanding as well, because like I said, we're going to top it off with a little bit of epoxy. So it's okay to sand it as well, just a little bit. Now with my bangle keychain, there wasn't too much on the back that I need to do because we made sure that we didn't bring it all the way to the top. And you will notice that there's a little bit of a indent where the epoxy cured and it kind of sunk down a little bit. That's completely fine because again, we're going to come through with some clear epoxy. We're going to fill in that little area, and then you won't even be able to tell that there was a little area there. Now I'm just going to finish up the back with a little bit of a rough sanding just to make sure that there are no harsh edges on the back, because people will be holding this in their hand and you want it as smooth as possible. And once I am done doing that, we're going to go ahead and move on to our tumbler as well. And just like I always do, I make sure that I come through, clean up my rim really well. It just makes it a lot easier in the end if you clean up your rim every single time you go. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that up really good. I'm going to take my sandpaper, make sure that I sand any little harsh edges down. Now, because we're working with metallic type glitters, I'm working with the leaves that are a metallic glitter. I'm working with the green that's metallic, and some of this rose opal actually has a little bit of metallic in it as well. So you don't want to sand it to the point of going all the way down to the glitter. You just want to sand down the points that are up in the epoxy itself. Now, if you feel confident enough that once you are done sanding that you could go ahead and apply your decals now, you could obviously absolutely do that. But if you feel like it's a little too lumpy, I would go ahead and throw another coat of epoxy on before I add my decals. But other than that, I didn't put any decals on it today because I wanted you guys to just be inspired by what I did. So no decals today for me. So I'm actually going to give it 2 last finishing coats of epoxy, and my tumbler is done. Now we're going to go ahead and finish up these coasters. So the first thing I do is I just take a little bit of my leftover epoxy that I was using to coat my tumbler with, and I'm just going to put a little dab right in the middle. I'm going to take my popsicle stick and just bring it all right out to the edge, and this is called doming. And we'll give it a very nice, finished, very professional look once it is cured. And for the bangle keychain, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to take my popsicle stick and just fill in where the indent is on the back of my keychain here. And if you feel like you're going to accidentally spill it over, that might happen, I would actually recommend placing these onto a silicone mat so that way it doesn't stick down to your box. You definitely don't want that, but nothing spilled over. I was good to go. I just filled in the back with my clear epoxy. I hit it all up really good with my torch. Now, after I let those cure, the only thing you have left to do is finish them off with any kind of matching keychain you would like. I got mine at Hobby Lobby, but I also know that Michaels sells them as well, and I know that Amazon has a very nice bulk selection of keychains, depending on if you want to do these as box sets for your customers or if you want to do these for just family as gifts. It's completely up to you on how you want to decorate these. Either way, I know you guys got this. Whether you take this design and duplicate it as is, or you take it and let it inspire you to create something that is completely your own, I hope that you guys had a lot of fun watching this tutorial today. Again, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.